Good evening, good morning. Welcome to week 7 of PSSL 6240 here in the Safety and Security Leadership Program at George Washington University. Almost done with the course. We just have this last week to go, and you have week 8 to study for the final and finish up your last paper. So, yeah, we're almost done, and we're heading to the home stretch. So just start off with announcements. Adobe Connect session. Wednesday, 10 June at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you can't make it, no problems, just let me know. We're going to cover two things. One, the Boston Marathon attack, and Group 3 will do a kind of an overview of that and the intelligence failures related to the Boston Marathon attack. And then I'm going to talk federal government jobs, working in the federal government, working in the Department of Defense, Homeland Security. So please send me any questions you have on that perspective to me ahead of time so I can tailor the brief a little bit closer to there. Paper two, much better. I think maybe this was a little bit less of an esoteric topic, so it's a little bit more focused on a very clear danger or intel danger. You could take a side and you could back that side up with evidence. I think the writing was clearer. I think maybe some comments from the first paper were taken to heart, and this was a much more better, clearer product than I saw the first time. One deficiency, you got to discuss the science. That's part of it. If you're talking about ricin, you need to know things like transportation of ricin, or how it's made by castor beans, and what are the signatures related to ricin production? What are the transportation hurdles? What are the shelf lives? Those are the types of questions you have to get to answer whether this is really a terrorist threat or not. You have to get into the science. Same thing with sarin. A lot of people did Syria. Sarin, binary versus unitary, shelf lives, ease of transportation. Those are the types of questions you have to answer. So please get into the science, or you should have gotten into science for this paper. Be brutal on the focus on the topics, and this goes for this paper as well as the next. Narrow it down. Just make sure that you're as focused as possible. I do not want one over the worlds. I do not want history of WMD. I do not want a history of policy, counterterrorism policy for the next paper. Be brutal about narrowing that topic down. And the last thing I kind of take away, I brought this up when I taught this class last fall. Think of Ebola. And I say this because maybe you're working for a governor, or you're working for someone on the National Security Council. They don't know Ebola. They don't know that all the issues with Ebola and the transmission. But he or she is gonna turn to someone like you and say, okay, give me talking points, give me a paper, give me something that when I go in the public, I can reassure them that Ebola is not a threat. And think like that when you're writing this paper, that, hey, someone's going to take what I say, what I write, they're going to use it in a speech. So they have to use very distinct language and tone to get their point across. And that's kind of, hopefully you got that understanding in this exercise. So it covers paper 2. Week 6 review. Are we more secure since 9/11? Huge debate. I think Mike had the most, vehemence on saying that we're not secure, or maybe not more secure, but certainly the billions, trillions, depending on how you account for it, were not worth the expenditure, or we're not getting our money's worth. I agree and disagree with that statement. And I think Mike presented his opinions pretty well. And I agree that we're not getting our money's worth. That are, if anyone tells you that we're $2 trillion, or the $2-3 trillion that we've spent since 9/11 on Iraq, Afghanistan, intel community, Homeland Security, Department of Defense, if you think that has made us more secure, or that was money well spent, then I think you need to get your head examined, because there's definitely plenty of, at the very least, poor allocation of resources. On the flip side, though, and this goes with TSA, NSA, I do think we are more secure since 9/11. And I'll give you an example. I think when people say the NSA has not stopped a single terrorist attack or their intelligence hasn't stopped a terrorist attack, one, that's not necessarily true. There were a handful of terrorist attacks stopped by the NSA. But more importantly, by the fact that we monitor our communications, or that we have an NSA, that forces the Osama bin Ladens and the Ayman al-Zawaris and the Anwar al-Awlakis to use hand carriers, to use 19th century technology. Imagine how easy it is to plan or do any terrorist activity if you have free internet access and you can use Skype, chat, cell phones with impunity. The fact that we have an NSA prevents the terrorist threat from acting with that impunity. Now, is it worth the cost in monetary? Is it worth the cost in civil liberties for that? I'll let you decide. But I do think that having an NSA capability and robbing the terrorists of their free range of comms is definitely a huge positive. Another example, TSA. Got a lot of bad news in the press. A lot of you reported on it in your discussion sections. 95%, or first, TSA has never stopped a bomb. It's never stopped a bomb. That's what you can measure. What you can't measure is, has it deterred a terrorist group from trying to plant a bomb? Because we have 8 levels of security that prevents it. So I do, and I'm a little biased, full disclosure, I worked at TSA, but I think it's good to have some sort of aviation security element to prevent just Johnny, I want to blow something up from targeting our commercial aviation sector. I think that if you want to target our commercial aviation sector, you have to be a little bit more professional. And that brings me up to those 95% of people got through. I'd have to see the statistics a little bit through, but yeah, maybe 95% of people with this type of explosive got through. However, what those red teams aren't measuring is, okay, I know a guy, that red team guy created a bomb or created his explosive device in his basement, and no one was monitoring. A terrorist is going to have to do it in Yemen, and he's going to have to worry about a drone strike. So a little bit of false equivalency in those stats. But I'll let you make that decision. So, are we more secure since 9/11? Again, I'll let you guys decide. A couple of questions as you're going through the National Geographic. What do you do if bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S.? Let's say you're that CIA briefer and you brief bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S. And then the president comes back to you and says, okay, what do you want me to do? And the reason I bring this up is because there's a lot brought up in the 9/11 Commission, a lot brought up in those National Geographic documentaries about this, that he was warned, or President Bush was warned. I don't necessarily buy that. I think this was a very vague threat. If you're the CIA briefer, if I'm the president, you come up to me like that, I would say, get out of my office. I would say, give me some solid recommendations, give me some solid intel that gives me a little bit more specific. Come in and tell me, bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S., and say, sir, I recommend that you increase the force protection level at Department of Defense bases. Or, sir, I recommend you increase the scrutiny at civil aviation. Or, sir, I recommend you invade Afghanistan, because that's how big the threat is. I think when you just come out and say, what do you do? Bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S., and you gave that vague threat, I think you need to, as an intel analyst, kind of bracket the threat a little bit better. Was 9/11 an intelligence failure? You've heard what I said in the lectures. I think, yes, the fact that we knew 2 of the terrorists were in Yemen or in San Diego, freely talking to a base in Yemen that was a known Osama bin Laden safe house, that these two people were not watch listed or not, this information wasn't passed to the FBI San Diego field office, that is an intelligence failure. Otherwise, I would have that debate because, again, sometimes stuff happens. 19 shadowy hijackers come in and they conduct an attack. Not necessarily intelligence failure, but the fact that we knew that two of the people were Al-Qaeda affiliates and were in the country and freely talking back to Yemen. I think that's a hallmark of at least an interagency intel failure. Fort Hood shooting, again, what point should radicalization be monitored? This is actually relevant to what happened this past week in Boston. The jihadists that tried to behead people. So, yeah, if someone's surfing on a jihadist website, do we now put that person on a list? If that person says, I'm against the Iraq war, do we put that person on a list for further scrutiny? If someone says, I don't like the movie American Sniper, should that person be on a list? So the question is, what language, what types of action deserves further scrutiny, further scrutiny? At what point in the radicalization chain should they be monitored? Do we have the appropriate funding structures, personnel to stop intelligence failures? This comes up a big question. Is it that we don't have enough money in the intelligence community, which few people would agree with that statement, or is it just you'll always have these human errors? Fort Hood, one person didn't talk to another person, and there's nothing we can do about it. I'll let you guys decide on whether there's a structural issue that causes these intelligence failures, or whether it's just stuff happens, or people don't talk to each other, and that's just human nature. And then finally, is there always going to be low-level attacks? And this is a question that will come up in the Boston when we talk about Boston this week. Are you always just, there's nothing you can do if two knuckleheads want to blow up something as a public display as the Boston Marathon? People are always going to be in crowds, and there are always going to be one or two knuckleheads. And how much money, resources, civil liberties compromise do we have to go through to just try and capture one or two knuckleheads? I'll let you guys again decide on that topic. So week 7, 2 topics: leadership targeting. Great articles. The Byman article on Foreign Affairs and the Cronin present a pretty good debate on leadership targeting. Is it a strategy, or is it just a tactic? Is it a tool of convenience? And now as we go into ISIS and we now have a threat over there, is leadership targeting going to be effective? Because no one wants to, well, I shouldn't say no one, but certainly the current administration doesn't want to send thousands of troops and ground troops into Mosul again. So the question is, would leadership targeting be an effective way to degrade ISIS? Under what circumstances is it effective? And we talk about that in the lecture. And then the second part is domestic jihadist threat. And this has been going on since about 2009, and it's probably spiked since the rise of ISIS in 2014. But why has there been a U.S. or an increase in radicalized Islamic fundamentalism in the United States? And this isn't just people creating plots. This is a spike in people surfing these websites, these jihadist websites. It's a spike in people traveling overseas to hot zones, Americans traveling overseas to hot zones. So the question is, why? What is their inspiration that does this? So I look forward to, again, this week's discussion, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the Adobe Connect session on Wednesday.